capture that?
Well, I was holding up the two of the leading tabloid newspapers from New York, where I presumably saw It's War, and says the New York Daily News, an active war, World Trade Center destroyed, many dead, according to the New York Post. And I was relating how that was, for me, eerily familiar. It was just like what happened 11 years ago, nearly 11 years ago, on the roof in downtown Tel Aviv, after Iraq struck near the Israeli Defense Ministry, and war had erupted a day earlier in the Persian Gulf. And that's pretty much what I was saying, Paula. And of course, here in downtown New York, a lot of activity at the site, the smoke. Some fear asbestos, PCBs, other poisonous substances, but nothing really confirmed yet. And of course, thousands of rescue workers down there, New York City, trying to dig out whoever could be saved in the rubble.
All right, Richard Roth, thank you for reporting that twice. As you can imagine, it is very difficult to establish any sort of communications close to that perimeter area around what used to be the World Trade Center. We're going to take a short pause here, and our coverage will continue.
This is CNN.
Eight a.m. on the East Coast, 5 a.m. on the West Coast, 23 hours, 15 minutes after everything seemed to change. From the CNN Center in Atlanta and from our reporters in New York, Washington, and all over the world, our coverage of America under attack continues here on CNN. I'm Miles O'Brien in Atlanta.
Good morning, Miles, and I'm Paula Zahn, joining you from New York City this morning. New Yorkers just beginning to grasp the magnitude of what their city went through yesterday. I want to show you behind me what the scene looks like today. Smoke continues to billow out of the area where the World Trade Center towers once existed, twin 107-story towers, the third building collapsing yesterday as well. This morning, there is a ray of hope. Rescuers are reporting that they have found 5 firefighters and a policeman alive under the rubble earlier today. We also believe that 2 other victims, we are told, had established contact with their families overnight on their cell phones. There is reason to believe they may be found, but the other news is going to make all of you sick. The mayor expects the fatality numbers to be horrendous. He calls them, quote, very, very high. We have reports of barges carrying victims, the deceased, across the river from New York City into New Jersey. There were reports last night of ferries carrying loads of bodies across the Hudson River. 3 cab companies ripping out the seats from their vans to help carry the dead to the military ocean terminal in Bayonne, New Jersey. We're going to check in with Gary Tuchman right now, who is closer than just about anyone to ground zero. Gary, we join you very close to 23 plus hours since the first attack here on New York City. What can you tell us about these rescues?
And Paul, that brings up the point, 23 hours you're talking about. This was the hour in which this happened yesterday. Yesterday at this time, everything was completely normal where I'm standing, right next to where the World Trade Center complex used to stand. People were going to work. People were walking into the World Trade Center complex, many of them for the very last time ever. What we're being told right now by authorities, they're updating the information to us, that 6 firefighters and 1 police officer have been rescued in the early morning hours. We're told the 1 police officer was seriously burned, but 7 different emergency officials have been rescued this morning. Last night, 2 police officers were rescued, so a total of 9 people, according to medics and emergency officials we talked to, have been rescued right now, and there is hope that at least 2 more are in the process of being rescued as we speak. But right now I stand here on Church Street, just north of where the 2 110-story buildings used to stand, and emergency officials are going in and out. We just saw about 2 minutes ago 2 incinerated cars brought out in the back of a flatbed truck. You couldn't even recognize that they were cars. They were completely melted. On the streets are a couple of inches thick of dust and grime and dirt. that have flown from the buildings over the last 24 hours since this terrible accident happened. And one thing you have to keep in mind about this, you keep hearing these were huge office buildings. These were like cities. 50,000 people work inside these buildings, two 110-story buildings. That's 220 stories of buildings in this complex. It was a huge megaplex. The bottom level itself of the World Trade Center complex had a subway station, also had a train station called the PATH station, that stands for Port Authority Trans-Hudson. It took New Jersey commuters to New York City every day, and then a shopping mall with dozens of stores and restaurants. On the bottom level alone, there are thousands of people, and we're talking about 220 stories. So it really shows you the terrible horror of all this.
Gary, before you go any further, I think I need to clarify that the statistics at the bottom of our screen right now actually can't keep up with the information you are reporting. Once again, you are confirming that in fact 7 survivors have been found, right? 6 firefighters, 1 police officer.
One thing I want to stress, Paula, oftentimes we are not comfortable with facts unless we see them with our own eyes. We have a lot of very nervous, very anxious, very sad, very traumatized emergency officials coming out and giving us this information. They tell us they are sure that there are 6 firefighters, 1 police officer rescued early this morning. We haven't seen it with our own eyes. We are taking their words for it, and that literally is all we can do because we are not allowed right next to the scene right now. But that is what emergency officials are telling us. 6 firefighters, 1 police officer rescued this morning, 2 police officers rescued last night for a total of 9.
All right. I think I need to mention that because I think these numbers are going to conflict throughout the day. You are closer to the pool of information than anyone, and we're going to rely on your numbers. Gary, one thing that I wanted to add at this point is the American Red Cross now has opened 12 shelters in New York City. Each is staffed with mental health professionals and nurses. And one of the points you were making earlier on is that the news that New York City has lost over 250 firefighters. They were among the 400 that were first sent in, and maybe as many as 85 police officers is hitting rescue workers darn hard. Are there any mental health professionals anywhere in that area to give support to these rescuers have the very tough job to going into this area of devastation?
Oh, good question. What we have been told by emergency officials that there are mental health professionals who are on the site who are available for discussions when people need.
Okay, Gary, I think you're breaking up. Let me see if you're still with us. Gary, you still there? Okay, we've lost Gary. We will come back to him a little bit later on this morning. Before we head back to Atlanta, I wanted to quickly recap what the status of life is like here in New York City. The NASDAQ, the Dow Jones closed, all public schools are closed, parochial schools, private schools, everything, all the businesses south of 14th Street, which is many blocks south of here, are closed. We know that the Empire State Building will remain closed. The Hudson River bridges and tunnels expected to be closed inbound. The Postal Service has suspended mail collection from blue postal boxes in 3 different bureaus. Miles, I'm sure you will continue to report this after all this morning, that all U.S. embassies and U.S. forces around the world have been put on high alert. One thing I wanted to mention as well, Miles, before you take this away, that the U.S. Navy is indeed sending aircraft carriers, the USS George Washington, the USS John F. Kennedy to the coast off of New York, and 5 other ships, including some guided missile destroyers and frigates, have also been sent to sea to reduce the number of ships in port. So that is the latest from here in New York, besides the fact that 750 National Guard troops have reported to armories throughout the city. Miles?
Well, Paula, before you get away, let me ask you a quick question. I might be a bit presumptuous here, assuming you went home. When you came to work in the wee hours this morning, did you have the sense that it seemed like a typical day, if you will, in New York? Was traffic such as it would be in a typical morning?
No. The streets were empty, and usually there's a pretty good pulse going here at 5 o'clock in the morning. I stopped by a deli to grab a cup of coffee and a stale bagel, I might add. And there were 4 or 5 people in line trying to also buy some breakfast and get a little caffeine. And I would say that everybody was in stunned silence. People weren't even even talking to each other. So clearly, not as many people are on the streets because a lot of companies told their employees not to come to work. So it's a distinctly different city today. And I think as the reality of the number of fatalities set in, this city will be forever changed. It's just the images that we witnessed here yesterday will be forever burned into our collective consciousness.
All right, Paula, we'll get back to you in just a bit. One of those days where we talk about it being before and after. Let's recap for just a moment. The horrifying images of the attack will, of course, be etched in our minds forever. It began just about 24 hours ago when the first airliner slammed into one of the World Trade Center towers. American Airlines Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles, was the intended itinerary. There you see the impact on the first tower, the North Tower of the World Trade Center. These are some late pictures we received overnight showing the attack from a slightly different angle. The huge fireball erupted as the jet tore through the building. Now, 18 minutes later, we have several angles on this attack. The second plane, this is a United Airlines Flight 175, also Boston, Los Angeles, its intended itinerary. It ripped into the South Tower. Both towers later collapsed into piles of rubble, the rubble we've been showing you all this morning. These are the dramatic scenes as the clouds of gray smoke enveloped lower Manhattan, causing a virtual stampede of rescue workers, members of the media who had responded to the scene. As the heroic search and rescue effort unfolds, an American flag stood amid the devastation. Let's send it back to Paula in New York.
All right, Miles, thanks so much. Right now, we're going to go to Joe Albaugh, who is the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Sir, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Paula.
Can you explain to us what you're going to be up to today?
Well, right now I'm in Washington making sure that we have all the resources that are necessary, both in the D.C. area, Pentagon, Northern Virginia, and for New York City. I've spoken with Governor Pataki, Governor Gilmore, Mayor Giuliani. They have what they need right now. Yesterday afternoon, I activated 12 urban search and rescue teams, 8 for New York City, 4 for Northern Virginia. They're on the ground or on their way right now. Our focus is still in a response mode, and that would be to identify, if we can, those that are still alive and remove them from the rubble.
Can you explain to us what these urban rescue teams are capable of doing, perhaps, that other rescue operators are not?
Well, they are highly trained search and rescue individuals from all over the United States. We have 28 national teams. We will use all the resources we possibly can. I'll be going to New York City this afternoon to make sure that we're doing exactly what we need to do. I think everyone understands the gravity of the situation. We have a huge task ahead of us. I'm concerned for those law enforcement officials and New York City firefighters who will be almost at the end of 24 hours in a few minutes. They'll be getting tired. We need to be rotating fresh troops in and out, making sure we continue during this time of need.
You will be briefing Congress later today, correct?
I will indeed, bringing them up to date on what we've done and what we will need in the near future.
What will you be asking for from Congress? Do you need additional funds?
Probably some additional funding right now. We're at the tail end of our current fiscal year. We've had numerous tropical storms. This is a tragedy that strikes at the heart of our entire country, and I'm sure Congress will make sure that all needs are met.
And I know, Mr. Albaugh, you say you are bringing in highly talented, specialized teams to assist in the rescue efforts here.
That's
what
correct.
do you think will be the biggest challenge that you and your team will encounter?
The biggest challenge right now are identifying those individuals who need assistance right now, either temporary housing or emergency cash. I would urge those individuals who have been affected directly by this tragedy to call our 800 number, 462-9029, 800-462-9029. If you need immediate assistance, identifying those folks are going to be a difficult challenge. But more importantly, we need to get to those individuals who are still alive in the building, in the rubble, and we'll do that.
And the most encouraging news, Mr. Albaugh, is that our Gary Tuckman is reporting that 6 firefighters have been rescued, 1 police officer in addition to 2 police officers last night, bringing the total to 9 victims rescued from the rubble of the World Trade Center.
And that gives us hope for others that will be alive, which has to be our focus. And I know everyone